Hey there. I am with my friend Chris today. We are going to have a discussion on some matters about uh, faith and unbelief, and does it make sense to believe in Christianity? And I'm really excited that my friend has agreed to join me on this call and on this video. I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we're going to jump in. And I think you're going to really enjoy what we have for you today. So, Chris, introduce yourself.
Rob, thank you very much. So my name is Chris. I uh, basically live here in Salem. I've lived in Salem for last 26 years. I grew up in San Diego. Um, as a child, when I was 9 or 10, uh, I was introduced to Christianity. Um, the flavor of it is United Pentecostalism. So I was consider myself a born again Christian, believed in the oneness of Jesus. And from there, I did Bible quizzing. So I learned a lot of the Bible, studied a lot. And really from there, I kind of had the passion of being a Christian. And it wasn't until about high school did I realize seeing other people who were other Christians claiming things of their religion and using the Bible, the same Bible that I was using, to show why they believed that what they had was true. And so that was the start of kind of like the questioning of it. And then in school, uh, as a United Pentecostal, they believe in young Earth creationists. They believe the Earth is only 6 to 8,000 years old, and unfortunately, science really has a hard problem with that, and with dinosaurs and all that. It struggled. So I would say that was kind of the beginning of my my questioning. At that point, I would say that was the beginning of my skepticism, and it took many years for me to go on this journey. For a long time, I would consider myself a deist, said that there was a God, but didn't really care about what was going on. I didn't really see any good evidence. And then, probably 2019, I started looking and really diving into the different religions and showed that there really wasn't good evidence, and that was my path to become what I now consider myself, is to be an agnostic atheist. The atheist part is I don't believe in any current God, um, but the not agnostic meaning I don't know. There could be a God. I'm I haven't seen good evidence to support that one exists. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell of kind of looking at it. And I try to entertain and listen to people like William Lane Craig, other Christians who have this devotion to believe that there is good evidence, and really, so it's just not taking information from the atheist side and not listening to the other side. I think to be open minded, we have to look at everybody's claims and everybody's side, because we're just siloed in our own echo chamber, then really are we growing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll
Yeah, I
start
love
out with
that.
that.
And I'll say too that that Chris and I, we've had some really spirited and very thought-provoking discussions over the last, I think, 3 almost 4 years that we've known each other. And I will say, I've always, every time I get a text message and I see it's from Chris, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a different kind of morning. So we've had some really, really good discussions, and I've always really enjoyed our dialogue. You kind of alluded to something, or actually you came right in and just you said it, and that's kind of what I want to maybe dig into a little bit, and that is that there's you believe it's possible that there's a God, but as of now you reject the idea that there is a God. I mean, you're an agnostic atheist, so
Yeah.
you don't believe in a God, but you don't know, right? I mean, you're open to the possibility that there is a God, but as of now, the evidence for you sort of points to no. I mean, is that a fair statement? So
So basically, nobody has presented evidence to show that a God exists. I think the best arguments get us to a deist type God, a
Sure.
God that may have started things, might have, but it doesn't go any further than that. To me, so a God that basically started things but you can't verify, to me, is the same as no God.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Fair enough. Fair
so
enough.
basically, and a lot of the good arguments just gets us there. I don't think it gets us to theism, and the biggest
So
thing is
so let me ask you this then. What is the burden of proof? Or in other words, how much evidence do you need? And what kind of evidence would you need to actually take one more step? Like how much, yeah, what kind of
yeah.
evidence would a person need?
And I think, for a claim that really we don't, I would say, like, we don't have God walking down the street. We don't have good, physical evidence that a God actually exists. I would believe that the evidence should comport to, how do we know fiction versus reality? How do we know that a God is just not imaginary? For example, um, is like, how much evidence would we need for magical unicorns or Loch Ness monster or these other things that we know that don't exist? There's people who believe that they've seen UFOs, and there's a lot of people who believe that they've seen UFOs. But it's interesting that if you've studied what people see in UFOs, that after movies like um, gosh, what is the movie called? Is it Counters of the Fourth Kind or something?
Yeah. I don't remember. I was
Of
not a huge
Counters of the
science
Fourth,
fiction guy.
but
Close
basically,
Encounters of the Third Kind.
yeah, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So after that, the aliens become more of this grayish little person. So it's very interesting how things can change kind of how we see things, and especially with aliens, there could be aliens. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but we have people who say they've seen them, but the majority of humanity, we don't. Why don't we believe that people have been visited aliens? Each person is different. My case is, there's not a really good evidence. A lot of times, anecdotal or testimonial evidence sometimes is the worst kind of evidence, because uh, there's no way to test it. There's no, Rob, if you told me I saw an alien yesterday, great, but how do you prove it to me?
Well,
How do you,
so that's
like,
right.
so for God, what evidence would it take? Is, I know this is might not be the best answer, but only a God would know, because I don't know what would convince me that a God exists. Probably
But
him showing
isn't
up
that
or
circular reasoning
something.
though? Like you're saying the only way I know that there's a God is if God knows what kind of evidence. And it's
But
kind of like it's like a Christian saying, well, I believe that the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true, right? So
yeah,
that's also circular reasoning. But then what you're
but
trying to do here, isn't that the same thing?
the thing is like, if, for example, if God appeared to me right now, sitting here, would my first impression be, am I hallucinating? Did somebody give me magic mushrooms? Or am I really seeing God? So, like, you have to start analyzing, and I don't think that right off the bat you can accept the claim. So, if something claimed to be God, is it God? Or is it just a powerful alien? Or is it my imagination? That's what I'm saying, Rob, is I'm not sure what kind of evidence, because it depends on what happened.
Well,
It
okay,
would be a personal, it would most likely be a personal experience. I think a
okay.
personal experience, or something that where we can um, test it or verify it or something like that.
But
So,
I think here's the problem that I think you just run into, and that is that on the one hand, you use the analogy of the aliens, and
mhm,
you refer to people who've claimed to see aliens, which is an experience.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're saying what I would need to be convinced of, and on the alien thing, you sort of reject that. You say lots of people have claimed to see aliens, but they've had this experience, but you reject the evidence. But then
I
how can
don't
you turn
reach.
around and say, well, for me, for the evidence to be convincing of Christianity, I need to have an experience. I mean,
Most
I
likely,
think it's a special pleading
but
here.
no, but I mean, really, when we look at it, a personal experience would probably be good. But what kind of evidence, like if in the sky it says "I'm God, I'm here," Chris? I mean, is that good enough evidence? That's why it's like, um, like what kind of evidence for aliens, like them physically showing up and everybody seeing them? That's
That would be pretty
this is
convincing.
a to me this is a hard question because right now God, I think, is a unfalsifiable claim. You cannot falsify God. So,
That's
for
true.
example, people who say, "Well, can you prove to me God doesn't exist?" No, I can't. Now, I mean, I can give good arguments of why I think the Christian God doesn't exist, whether it be in looking at the Bible and looking at stories that we see in the Bible that take place in the physical world, that I believe that there's good evidence, like for example Noah's flood. I believe that there's good evidence to support that that did not happen. So physical stories that happened, do we have good evidence to support it? I think that is a good place to start because we can see what's going on in the physical world. So I think if a claim of a God and a claim that a God did things or said things, if we can have good evidence to support those things really happened, I think that is a good start. And that's the problem. I know that your claim is Christianity, but I think you have to step backwards to it because I believe that sometimes you're presupposing that the Jewish God actually existed. But first, you have to prove that that God actually existed before we even get to Christianity. How do you know that Yahweh existed? How do we know that the God created? Like, if you are a biblical literalist, I believe that a biblical literalist is going to struggle when it comes to kind of the evidence that we have in the natural world. And I think that's the problem. And there's a lot of um, people who are scientists that believe in God, and a lot of times they detach the two. And I understand that you can believe in like evolution and still believe in God. So I believe that there's people that still take their faith and believe it no matter what the evidence, and they may accept the other evidence, but they still hold on to their belief, whether or not they're not young earth creationists anymore, or they believe that the stories are just allegory. And then
Right.
if somebody like Catholics, I believe majority of them believe that a lot of the stories are allegory, that they did not happen. But then I feel like then Christianity starts to fall apart because if you don't have Adam and Eve, original sin, what was the point of Jesus? I
And
mean,
there's
so
actually where you and I actually agree on that, in the sense of if you start pulling the Jenga blocks apart from the tower, it doesn't take real long before the whole thing falls apart. So I actually think you're right about that. I mean, I think Christians now I qualify that in a pretty major way. I mean, I think with the story of creation and that there are other plausible readings of a story like that, that account for either evolution, or not so much evolution, although there's that too, but that account for more than just a 7-day literal creation period, right? In other words, and I count myself among those. I am not a my conviction is that creation was not a literal 6-day plus a day of rest process, although others would push back and say, yeah, it is. And I'm on my for my part, I'm like, well, that's not the main focus of the story. That's a whole separate topic, which actually I'm going to get into in a later video when we talk about Christianity and science. Um, but I think you're right in that if you start labeling everything just allegorical, I think it's not very long, and you start getting away from the whole tower, the whole
but
deck of cards begins to fall
but
apart.
but for some people it may fall apart. Others, we
Yep.
call them Catholic, we call them Catholics, or we call them other types of Christians. So I believe that um, somebody who has a faith in a God may have it for many different reasons.
Yep.
And I honestly don't think evidence was one of them. I don't think any that I know of. Again,
Well,
it's
but so let
possible,
me,
but
here's
but
what,
but
go ahead.
like for example, you basically tell people, you tell the story that Jesus died for you of your sins, and it's told that there was eyewitnesses, but really it's not like, oh yeah, this is good evidence, I'm going to believe it. There's sometimes something else that, and I don't know what it is,
Mhm.
that gets people to believe. I'm not sure if it, I mean, and again, everybody, I think, can believe for different reasons.
Mhm.
And
Right.
people may not believe for different reasons too. So not every person who claims to be an atheist or whatever is going to have the same reasons why I do. Um, you know, I believe that there is no God. I believe that people who do believe, that's great. I will be the first person to respect somebody's right to believe and their way to worship. Um, so I will be the first person to support their rights in
Sure.
any situation, any religion. But one thing that I also will be the first to is to push back on anybody who wants to try to force their beliefs or morality onto others without a good secular reason behind it.
Hmm.
And that's to me the crux of everything. If you want to believe in God, but you go out and you help people and you believe in people's freedoms, autonomy of people, and great, good for you. But the problem is that when you start accepting things without evidence, how many other things do you accept without evidence? And I think we
But you're
saw
begging
this
the question
here.
there
No,
because
hold on, Rob. Hold
yeah.
on. Let me. So the reason why I say this is people who may believe things without evidence, how those kind of people can get into issues where now, like for example, people believe um, that the 2020 election was stolen, that Donald Trump really won the election. There's no good evidence, but there's people who believe it. Why? Why? Because a guy said so. Is there evidence? He says there is. Is there good evidence? No, there's not. But there's people who believe it. And that's the thing, is that as humans, if we try to just say, you know what, I'm going to follow the evidence. I'm going to basically try to use an outsider test and look at, is there good evidence? Not say just because a man or a book said it. What does the evidence lead me to? And unfortunately, the evidence does not lead me to Christianity. I mean,
So
that's
that's the claim I wanted to push with you a little bit, because um you say that there's no good evidence, and of course
yes.
that's kind of the crux of this issue, is what is good evidence. So do I could ask you the question, do you believe that there's a person named Mahatma Gandhi who once existed? And I think you would say what?
I would say, so you mean Gandhi? Are you
Sure.
talking about Gandhi?
Yeah, yeah.
Or, okay, are you, okay, sure. I mean, it's a possibility that Gandhi existed. We have stories of Gandhi. Great.
And Joseph
Now,
Smith, same question.
so, like, we know that Joseph Smith existed.
Mhm.
Now, the question is, did Joseph Smith find some gold tablets?
Right.
Did the Book of Mormon come from divine revelation, or did he make it up?
Right.
Or did he think it was coming? So, to me, it a lot of times we have to look at different possibilities. He could have made it up. It could have been God, or it could have been he thought it was from God.
Mhm. So
There could
those
other
are,
be possibilities, but
right, but those
for
are those are related but slightly different questions, right? Because there's a
okay,
question of historical existence. And then there's the question of what did he claim, and whether he is Gandhi or whether he is Joseph Smith or whoever else, what did he claim about who he actually was? And then how do you evaluate those claims, right? So we can agree Joseph Smith is a historical person, and we can agree that he has these gold tablets and these revelations.
He said he had them.
He claimed that he had them, right?
Claimed
He claimed that he had them.
That's the problem. We don't know.
And so there's where the question is, so what evidence is there for that? And then there's lots of possibilities. There's because I would agree, I think, with you in that I'm not sure that there is good evidence for the existence of these gold plates. Now, he obviously did something. He wrote the Book of Mormon. Was he hallucinating? Was he intentionally deceiving people? Was he having a dream that whatever? Was he there's lots of possibilities for that.
Or it could have come from God.
Or it could have come from God. Sure. I mean, we can allow that in the realm of possibility, right? Because there's a lot of people that would claim that.
Yeah.
But then you have to evaluate the claims that he's making about himself, essentially, and what he's seeing. And I would agree there's lots of evidence for the existence of a person named Joseph Smith who traveled, westward and settled in Utah and had these revelations. That's really not in dispute. But my question is on the evidence of these other things. Now, apply that to Christianity. Okay, so my first question is there evidence that a historical figure named Jesus of Nazareth, or Jesus, son of Joseph, is there historical evidence that such a person existed in your view?
And here's the problem. I will go down this path for you, but the problem is that first you have to show that the person named God, however you want to define your God's name, Yahweh, whatever, God, capital G, actually existed. Because to me, to get to Jesus, you first have to prove that your God existed. And like the stories of Adam and Eve, the flood, if these stories don't exist, or if these things didn't happen, it doesn't matter about Jesus, because to me, that God doesn't exist. So
but can't you go at it from the other direction, though?
I feel like no. I feel like if we're starting at Jesus, we're already presupposing that God existed, that there was truly a God,
possibly
in that.
But I don't know that it's necessary, right? Well, I take your point, like because Jesus, even in the Christian viewpoint, Jesus is sort of the culmination of revelation, right? So you get all these other stories and events, and then it kind of reaches its climactic moment in Jesus. And so I take your point that if you don't believe all that other stuff, then it's hard to believe that Jesus is anything. But I think there's another way to get at it, which is to say, take this person named Jesus and try to figure out who he is and what kind of claims does he make about himself, and is he completely out to lunch, or is there something to what he's saying? And if there's something to what he's saying, then can you work backwards and say, well, maybe if he's building on all this other revelation, then maybe that other revelation might make some sense too.
Yeah, but if you have a God in the Old Testament who condoned slavery, condoned the mass murder of women and children, who supposedly flooded the whole world because he was pissed, and he basically said screw everything and drowned babies and animals and basically said whatever. If that's the God of the beginning, I can't see anybody who's watching this can say, well, that's a really good guy. No, that's the problem, is that God is horrible.
But that has no bearing on whether or not he exists, though.
That is correct. That is correct. And that is correct. That has no bearing on if he exists or not. God could be that type of God. But what I'm saying is, if that's the type of God that's written in the Bible, why do people worship this type of God? Why does people think this God is good when these horrible things happen? Now, let's go back to Jesus. Do I believe that Jesus existed? Sure. there was a person named Jesus. I could basically, why? To me, there's people who are mythicists that believe that he didn't exist. There's a lot of, but a lot of the historians believe that there was a person named Jesus. Now, did he have 12 disciples? Did he go around? Did he cast demons into 2,000 pigs and run them off a cliff? Did he curse a fig tree during non-fig season for not having figs? Did he walk on water? That's the claims that I say, show me the evidence. And I don't think it's to me or anybody else who doesn't believe to be the one to put the monkey on our backs. If you want me to believe that Jesus did this, I need good evidence. And that's the thing. I think when we're pushing back, it is the person who's making the claim. So if you're telling me, Chris, Jesus did these things, I'll say, Rob, okay, open mind. How do we know?
Yeah.
How do we know these things happen?
And right.
And that's where I go back to you.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. Now, I'm going to punt here for a minute, and I'm going to say, what would it take to change your mind on that? Like you say, you need good evidence. So,
Evidence.
but what is that? I mean,
like evidence that evidence that it happened. It's like, do you have good evidence that it happened? Okay, here's the thing, and here's the things that that I push back on it is because for the New Testament, and pipe in if you disagree, that the earliest writings we have are writings of Paul, and the gospel writings happened after Paul. The problem is that Jesus never wrote down anything he said, nor do I believe that there's anything that we have physically eyewitness to corroborate that this was going on. No secondhand, no eyewitness, no objective, no, for example, you have in the Bible saying that 500 witnesses. We have, who are the 500 people? Nobody wrote anything down. So we don't have anything writing things down at the physical time. We have Paul, who was an eyewitness, who had this vision on Damascus. It could have been schizophrenia, could have been made up, could have been. So I consider Paul kind of like the Joseph Smith scenario. We don't know what he saw was real. We don't know, just like Joseph Smith. I consider those to be the same type of pushbacks and that's the thing, is that what evidence would it take? Oh, and I think that's where it goes back to, does even this God exist? And all I have is the Bible to look at these stories. And in a physical world, I can say that some of these stories didn't exist. So is the book just, did they make up these stories? Did they really come from God? And that's where I live, I'm just like, okay, so help me out here.
So I think there's a couple things that I would say in response to that. I mean, part of it is the lack of Jesus writing anything down that doesn't negate anything. That just says that our source of evidence rests somewhere else. Well, right? Because there's lots of people that we believe in that historically existed, but there's nothing written about them, right? They haven't left us anything. So then my question becomes, well, why are we still talking about this person named Jesus 2,000 years later? He was a pretty ordinary guy apart from these miracles. I mean, he's a rabbi. He's a teacher. If he made up all these things, and if all these stories are made up about him, then why are we still talking about him? Are we just talking about a mythical figure that people decided to invent? And if so, why?
Why do we have possibly 15 million Mormons who believe Joseph Smith got the Book of Mormon and that there was Christians in pre-America? Why do we have 15 million? Because sometimes people believe things for different reasons. Mm-hmm. Again, do you, these Mormons, do you believe that they looked and said, oh, Joseph Smith, I mean, there was eyewitness. Yep, that's why I believe. Oh, look at the evidence that we see that these Christians were in the Americas. No, they're not.
Right.
But that's the problem, Rob, is that people believe things for multiple reasons. And if you go to a Mormon and you show them the inconsistency of the Book of Mormon, the fact that we have no good evidence to support that Christianity was here in the Americas, they would just say, they may use something like, well, Joseph Smith, and I've heard this, he was dumb. How could he have made it up? How could he have made it up as quickly as he did? So those types of, I consider those fallacy from ignorance. It's like, well, just because you think he's so stupid, then it has to be God. Well, the problem with Christianity, and going back to that, is again, we have these claims about Christians that Christianity happened, right? We know that basically Paul was writing, he's preaching to people. So we know that the religion started, and we know that it came from this area. But what we don't know is, did the accounts that are listed actually happen? Or were they stories that were made up? Or people thought they were real? Or again, the whole
but those are those experiences though that you started talking about, right?
But I have no way to go back and validate that those things in the Gospels actually happened.
Well, that's true, but here's where the 500 eyewitnesses and that's mentioned in the New Testament, the Christian New Testament, 1 Corinthians 15. On the one hand, you're right. Like, you and I could not travel to the Middle East tomorrow and say, we've got to hunt down these 500 people so we can start asking some questions, right? We can't do that, obviously.
They're all dead. Yeah, I mean.
But in Paul's day, you could have done that. Like Paul would have said, there's 500 of them, and he additionally gives some names of some people that you could have cross-examined. You could have asked them these questions of, hey, did you not see this resurrection? And they would have said, what are you talking about? No, there's no resurrection.
But really,
and the story would have fallen apart within weeks.
But I mean, you could say the same thing about any other religion. Look at Islam and Hinduism and everything else. And so just because we have something 2000, just because we have stories of something that happened, and now that it's believed,
it's not
doesn't
proof,
make
though.
it.
It's supporting evidence, right? I mean, it says here's a way that you could have falsified the story. You could have proven the story false by interrogating these witnesses, and presumably that would have happened.
But what if? How do we know that there was witnesses? We don't even know that the witnesses exist. We don't even know if people even try. We don't know. There could have been people who tried and don't believe.
From silence, though. You're saying, well, we don't know if people tried, so it must not be true. Like,
no. What I'm saying is that I believe that your statement of, well, that they could have gone out and verified that it was not true. So because that didn't happen, that brings a good light to possibly it being true. Well, couldn't we say the same thing about a lot of the different religions, like Mormonism? Like people
are there multiple people who have claimed to have seen the golden plates of Mormonism?
Yes, there's eyewitnesses.
Who are they?
I do not know that. I believe that there's 3 eyewitnesses. So there's 3 and 8.
Okay.
And it's basically listed into the Book of Mormon. And so here's the thing. You're going to be skeptical. You're going to be skeptical just like me, and you're going to start analyzing the evidence and start picking it apart to see if it's true. And that's the thing about the New Testament. I am doing the same thing as you, and I'm accepting. Now that here's the thing. Joseph Smith was about 200 years ago or less. The New Testament's 2000. I can't go back. And the problem is that there's no written accounts that I've seen from other sources outside of the Bible that shows that these things actually happen. And I'm wondering if Jesus really rose from the dead, if miracles did happen, why is there no other writings anywhere around that time? Around 20 some odd 30, there's no writings, none.
Well, that's not exactly true, though. Sure, there is.
What writings do we have from
Josephus, other evidence as well.
When did Josephus? what time frame was Josephus writing? Was he alive during the time of Jesus?
No, but are you saying that any historian that was not alive during the time of a
What I'm
historical
saying
event is
is
not a reliable historian?
but what I'm saying is that an eyewitness person, an eyewitness testimonial witness that is writing outside of these works, there's no writings outside of the Bible. Why is there nothing written
But there is,
outside
though.
of it?
But
What?
but I believe there is.
But not at the time that these things were happening.
But then if
Not
that's
at the
your
time.
standard, then you're going to have to throw out a lot of other historical works because they weren't written during the time.
But other historical works isn't deeming whether or not you go to heaven or hell, or
I
basically how
realize
you're
that, but it's
saved.
a question
But
of it's a question of the standard of evidence. We're gonna have to end it there because I'm out of time, but we should pick this up again. Because this is great discussion, and I think these are very relevant and very important questions. So Chris, I want to thank you. I you know, we haven't solved all the world's problems yet.
no,
We keep doing this and we will.
but I think people should be skeptical and look at the good evidence. And, you know, if they're going to apply certain evidence to their claim, look at other claims and say, if I did this, would I be a Muslim? Would I be a Mormon? And that's the thing, is that if you applied the same level that you're applying now, you could be any religion, to be quite
Well,
honest.
we believe it or not, I think there's a part of that that we actually do agree on, and that is that I believe that Christians should ask questions. I think they should evaluate the claims of their religion. Now we part ways on what is the standard, because I think there is good evidence, if not proof. I don't believe in actual proof, but I believe in good evidence for the existence of Christianity. But we have a difference of opinion on that. But regardless, we both, you know what, we've had good dialogue, and I always appreciate your perspective.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
thank you. I've got to end it now because I'm out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you, Chris. We'll do it again. We'll see if we
Okay.
can jump into another one of these and explore this a bit further. So thanks, Chris. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.